Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of me judging my subscribers' fish tanks for views. Before we get started, make sure you like this video, and also if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and the notification bell as well, so that way you get notified whenever I upload a new video. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So I posted on Twitter and Instagram and also made a community post here on YouTube asking you guys to send me pictures of your fish tanks for me to review for a video. And these are the photos you guys sent in. The first person to send me a photo was actually Megan Mulder, Winslow the Dragon. She sent me this lovely photo of a fish bowl with 2 goldfish in it. You guys know how I feel about fish bowls, so I'm just gonna move on. The next photo came from Bay Area Aquatics, and he sent me this really, really lush planted tank with this awesome piece of driftwood. And I love this. I think that this is a 75 gallon, correct me if I'm wrong on that. And instead of getting big fish for it, it looks like it's just got a bunch of live bearers in it, and I think that's awesome. Oh, there's angelfish in here too. This is the tank that's in the background of all of his YouTube videos, and I can see why. It's a really cool tank. I see 2 hang-on back filters. I also see a sponge filter on the side of the tank. And this is a really cool tank. Not too overstocked, very well planted, awesome aquascape, 9 out of 10. Next, we got a couple of photos from Cameron, Learning to Fish Keep. He sent me a couple of photos of this bow front tank, and this is really cool. I love that piece of driftwood that kind of just climbs up the side of the tank. That's really cool. I definitely see some platies, I see some tetras, a wide variety of plants in here. As far as the hardscape goes, not only is there that awesome piece of driftwood, but I see some dragonstone, and then there's a ton of plants in here, just a huge variety of plants. I really like this. I'm not sure what size the tank is. I'm not very good at eyeballing a tank and telling what size it is, but this looks like a really good sized tank for what it is. It's obviously bigger than like a 20 gallon or something like that. It looks like it's maybe somewhere in the 30 to 50 gallon range. Very cool. 8.5 out of 10. Next, we got a series of photos from Matthew Moore, but it looks like they're all on the same tank. And one of them is actually a video, so let's watch that. Very cool. I like the driftwood in the middle of the tank. I love that background. I love the rockscape. I see that you've got a sponge filter on one side. I see an intake hose for a hang on the back filter or maybe a canister filter. And I see there's a wave maker off to the other side. So that's really cool. So there's a lot of circulation, a lot of water flow in there. And this is definitely... Buffy, why do you have to just make so much noise and click, 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 click on the floor while I'm filming? All the rest of the day, you lay on the couch and don't do anything, but as soon as I turn this camera on, you start walking around on the hardwood floor. Why? This is definitely a cichlid tank coming from Matthew Moore Cichlids. That's definitely understandable. I don't know a whole lot about cichlids, so I'm not sure what species of cichlid these are, but I love that orange coloration that's on their belly. And Matthew Moore is the only person that I know of who has managed to successfully keep plants in a cichlid tank. He ties the plants to rocks and buries the rocks underneath the sand. That's his $1 million trick to keeping cichlids from uprooting his plants. But I think it works for him, and it looks really cool. It looks like maybe there might be a pleco in here too. I'm not entirely sure, but that's what that looks like in the corner of the screen there. Really awesome tank, Matt. I love how not overstocked this tank is. I love how much room the fish have. I love the way the fish look in this tank. I love the background. I love the hardscape. I love the plants. Well done. Well done indeed. 8.5 out of 10. Next, we're going to look at some photos from Mercy, and she sent me 5 emails, each one with multiple photos of different tanks. And I'm not going to review all of them in this video because it's just a lot of photos. So I'm just going to pick a couple of her tanks to review. Let's start out with the goldfish tank. She says this is a 60-gallon tank with 2 goldfish that she's had since they were teeny tiny babies. Their names are Piggy and Dum Dum. They eat real plants if she puts them in there, so she's got fake plants in there. I think this is really cool. 60 gallons for 2 goldfish is really good. That is definitely above the minimum water volume per goldfish, which is 20 gallons per goldfish. I see that you've got a really strong filter on there, which is definitely needed with goldfish. One thing that I don't love about this tank, though, is actually the gravel. Maybe it's just my own personal style choice, but that neon pink and neon green, that's just not for me. I like more naturalistic looking things. Not trying to knock your style at all, it's just not my style. But another thing about gravel with goldfish is it's often recommended that you don't use gravel for your goldfish. Instead, it's recommended that if you're going to use a substrate that you use sand, because goldfish like to spend a lot of time hunting for food down in the substrate. So it is kind of risky to use gravel as your substrate with goldfish because they could accidentally get that gravel stuck in their mouth or ingest it and get impacted. So I am going to have to dock a few points for that. But I do like that you've given the fish a lot of swimming room. You have not over-decorated the tank. That is something that's very important with goldfish, is that you don't over-decorate the tank because they are very boisterous fish and they will knock your aquarium decor over. I'm going to give you a 6 on this tank. Next, she sent me a couple of betta tanks, a 5-gallon and a 3-gallon, and then a community tank. And I think I really want to review this community tank next. It looks like it's about 10 gallons or so, which is fine for a small community tank as long as you don't have too many fish. It looks like there is definitely some fake plants in here. We stand a lushly planted tank, even if it's fake plants, we stand. I like the rock hide, I like the log hide. And let's look at the stock of the tank. So you say you've got a few Danios, a few neon tetras, a panda guppy, so 7 or 8 fish total. It is a 10-gallon. And the pleco's temporary. Scrolling through, I also see a frog, an African dwarf frog, and I do see the pleco. Looks like it's a bristlenose pleco, and that's a platy. I definitely see a platy in here. So as long as the pleco is temporary in there, that's fine, but you are definitely going to need to upgrade that pleco to a bigger tank. I hope you have a bigger tank. That pleco is definitely going to outgrow that 10-gallon. Even if it's a bristlenose or something like that, 10 gallons is still not ideal. The African dwarf frog is just fine. You say you have a few Danios and a few neon tetras. I don't see any neon tetras in any of these photos, and I only see one Danio in one of these photos. These are both schooling fish, and they need to be in groups of 5 or 6, bare minimum, preferably more. And you can't really have a proper number of either of these schooling fish or enough room for them to school in a 10-gallon tank. They don't school with each other either. You need to have at least 5 or 6 Danios and at least 5 or 6 tetras, and you need to have them in a bigger tank. I don't see the panda guppy, but I definitely see a platy in here. And I'm thinking maybe that is what you're thinking is the guppy? I'm not sure. So my suggestions for this tank are to move the schooling fish and the pleco into a bigger tank. If that is a bristlenose pleco, then you can go with maybe a 20-gallon or 29-gallon and move all of those schooling fish and that bristlenose pleco into something like that. If that is not a bristlenose pleco, it's more of a common pleco, then you're going to need a much bigger tank because that fish is going to outgrow that tank. As far as the 10-gallon goes, you can definitely go ahead and leave the African dwarf frog, and you can leave the, you're saying guppy, but I'm seeing a platy. You can leave that in there and get more of them, and just make this a live bearer and African dwarf frog tank. Docking points for the stock choices, but I'm giving you points for the cool aquascape. 6 out of 10. Pets and Aquatics sent me this picture of a tank. You said 400 liters, very heavily planted. I can tell these are definitely live plants. I love that piece of driftwood that's off to the side of the tank. I like the gravel. This is really cool. I like this a lot. I love that overgrown jungle val that you have in the background. It's really lush, but I don't really see any fish in the tank. Now this photo is kind of blurry, so I don't know if maybe there are fish swimming around and I'm just not seeing them, or if there's just not very many fish in here. I don't know, but I don't see any fish, so I can't critique you on the fish. But just based on the aquascape alone, I'm gonna give you a 9 out of 10. Dusty, I can't even comment on that. Abby. What is with y'all sending me troll photos? Davis Exotics, what have you sent me? You sent me 2 photos. One of them is a very lushly planted tank with a lot of little caves and hides in it, and also a lot of algae. And this is your live bear tank. I see you've got a bunch of guppies in here of varying colors. So this is definitely your mutt guppy tank that we've talked about before. I'm not here to algae shame, but it does look like the algae is trying to overtake your plants. So I would do something about that because you've got giant clumps of algae in the tank. And I have lost plants to giant clumps of algae before where the algae just smothered the plant out. So I would definitely take care of that and try to remove that algae. I really do like the aquascape here. I know it's just kind of all over the place, but that's what I like about it. Also, I dig the mutt guppy tank. I like all of the color that comes from a mutt guppy tank. I'm gonna give you a 7 for that tank. As for the other tank, the long tank that you have here, 3 angelfish it looks like, and some red-eye tetras. You've got a really cool piece of driftwood, which actually looks like it might be fake, but that's okay. I like it. And then you've got some real plants in here. You've got some guppy grass floating up on the top. You've got, what is that, Anubias, and maybe a micro sword. It is a little more sparsely planted than the other tank, but it's not terrible. I like how understocked the tank is. I really like that you haven't just gone nuts and thrown a whole bunch of fish into the tank, and that the fish that you do have in there have plenty of room to swim around. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a 7 on this one as well. The aquascape could be a little bit better, but I really appreciate all of the space that you've given your fish in this tank, and I'm sure that the fish appreciate it as well. Next, we got Matthew Grob 16 sent me this really cool looking tank. What is this? It looks like it's maybe 5 or 10 gallons. Again, I'm really bad at eyeballing a tank and telling you what size it is. It looks like it's probably 10 gallons, but it could be a 5 gallon. It's got a single betta in it. Matthew and I have spoken since he sent me this photo, and unfortunately that betta fish did sadly pass away due to old age. He had it for nearly 2 years. Who knows how old it was when he got it, and it unfortunately just passed away due to old age. But this tank is amazing. I really love this aquascape. I love all of the wood that's in it. I love the big clump of guppy grass that's at the top. I love all of the leaf litter, the cholo wood. Looks like you've got some rocks in there as well. All those tannins are really beneficial to a betta fish, and I'm sure that your betta fish really did enjoy it. I would definitely, at least in part, attribute your betta fish's long lifespan to all of the tannins that are in that tank. In addition to the health benefits that it gives a betta fish, it just looks really cool. Well done, 9 out of 10. Bridget from BB's Beasties sent in a photo of her 5-gallon fluval speck. It has seen some changes since the last time I did one of these videos. She's still got that octopus ornament, and I think that's really cool. I hope that that stays in this tank. But she's just recently redone the tank as far as plants go, and the plants haven't had time to settle in yet. As far as livestock in the tank goes, we've got 2 Corydoras and 2 Nerite snails. Bridget already knows this because we've already spoken, but having only 2 Corydoras is no bueno. It's not about the bio load either, because honestly the bio load in this tank is just fine with 2 fish and 2 snails. The problem is that Corydoras are a schooling fish, and they need to be in groups of a bare minimum of 5 or 6, preferably even more. In the wild, Corydoras school in groups of thousands. She did say originally she had 3 of them in the tank, but 1 of them passed away. 3 is also not enough. 5 gallons is not enough. You need to have at least 5 or 6 of them, and they need to go into a 20-gallon or larger tank, just so that they have the room to exhibit schooling behavior. Bridget and I have spoken about this already. She's definitely learned from this experience, and she is going to be building a larger tank, and I believe getting more Corydoras as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. But as far as what you do with this tank goes, honestly, I'd keep the snails in there and I'd get a betta fish. That is my recommendation. And since the tank is not super densely planted, you know, there's a lot of free swimming room up at the top of the water column, I would recommend that you get a short fin betta like a placotte. Editing Jeremy here, I forgot to rate this tank. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Next, we have a photo from Elle, aka Elle's Reptiles, and she sent in this 5.5 gallon tank that is currently fishless, but patiently awaiting a betta. And this tank looks really cool. I like that piece of driftwood that you have. I can see you've got a hang-on back filter, and you've got a heater. That black gravel that you have is really cool. And as far as the plants go, I like the moss balls, I like the Anubias, I like the Amazon sword, and I like the Java fern that you have in the background. Now, here's a tip about Java fern. You have your Java fern planted in the gravel, it's going to die that way. With Java fern, you can't really bury the roots in gravel because they'll suffocate. What you want to do is attach that Java fern to the driftwood. Whenever I do this, I personally use bread ties, or sometimes I'll just wedge the root of the Java fern into a crevice and let it take off from there. Also, another recommendation is perhaps an alteration to your filter. I see that this is a top fin filter. I know this because I've had a top fin filter before, and I can just tell by the intake tube that this is a top fin filter. And I could potentially see a betta's long fins getting sucked into the intake tube. And so I would recommend that you find some way to cover that intake tube with a sponge of some sort. A really, really coarse sponge to prevent your betta's sensitive fins from getting sucked into the slits on the intake tube and ripping. I can tell the tank is still cycling. The water is slightly cloudy. It tells me that you're going through a bacterial bloom right now, which is part of cycling a tank. So I'm not gonna knock you for that. If you are getting a long fin betta, like a half moon, then I recommend that you go a little bit more lush with the plants. Moss balls are cool and all, and they do help your water quality. But the thing about long fin bettas is they can oftentimes feel like their fins are weighing them down and inhibiting their ability to swim. And so if they have a whole lot of open, free swimming room in the top of the tank, sometimes they'll be inclined to nip at their own fins because they feel like their fins are too long. My recommendation is if you have something like a 5 gallon to a 10 gallon tank and you put a long fin betta in it, that you have a super lushly planted tank with super tall plants that reach all the way up the water column, and maybe even some floating plants that have roots that dangle down into the water column as well. Basically what I'm saying is you don't want to be able to see through the tank. If you stand on the side of the tank and you look through it, you should not be able to see out of the other end. If you can see out of the other end, you need more plants. I keep forgetting to rate these tanks. This one's an 8 out of 10. Kaylin sent me a photo of a 10 gallon tank that she is currently using for bladder snails and tadpole snails. A 10 gallon tank just for snails. That's really cool. Not only is it a 10 gallon tank, but it's a heavily planted tank. Looks like you've got crypts in here, perhaps some Anubias of some sort as well. I like the dark background. I can see you've got an aquarium filter, even a heater. That is above and beyond for pest snails, I gotta tell you. I really like this a lot. Considering it's just a snail tank, 10 out of 10. Becca is Soup sent me this. Cichlid Bros sent me a 75 gallon cichlid tank, which is really cool. Okay, I take it back. Matthew Moore is not the only person I've ever seen keep live plants in a cichlid tank, because here it is again. I don't know if you're using the same trick that Matthew used where he tied the plants to rocks and buried the rocks in the sand, but whether you did or not, this looks really cool. Again, I don't know a whole lot about cichlids, so I don't know what species of cichlids these are, but I can definitely tell the tank is not overstocked. I see 3 fish in here. There might be more, they might be hiding, but just looking at this one photo, I only see 3 fish. I like the black background. I think that that complements the black stand really well. I see you've got a hang-on back filter, and also what looks like an intake tube for another filter of some sort. Perhaps you have an external canister filter in that stand. I don't know, but it looks really awesome. This is actually a really gorgeous tank. I like that black and white sand. I like that tan piece of driftwood. I like the rocks. I like the little cichlid cave that you have. Well done, 10 out of 10. Next photo submission is from someone who I suppose is new following me. Their handle is @officialcostco. I'm sure it's not actually Costco, but they did send photos of more than one tank, and none of the photos show the entire tank, so I can't really tell what size the tanks are, so I can't really comment on if the tanks are overstocked or not. In the first photo, I definitely see a trumpet snail right there on the front of the glass, but I don't see any fish. I just see a whole bunch of plants, which is really cool. I see that it's round on the front. If I were to guess, I would say this is one of those 3-gallon top fin tanks that they sell at PetSmart, but I could be wrong. And the next two photos look like they're from a different tank. I see one cherry barb, I see several glow light tetras, I see a couple of corydoras, but unfortunately I don't see enough of the tank to see how big it is. It looks very lush and very densely planted, which I do like, and I like the natural look of it, but I don't see enough of the tank to give it a proper rating. So on the first tank, I'm gonna give you an 8 out of 10, just for how heavily planted it is. And on the second tank, unfortunately, I have to give you a 5, just because I can't see enough of the tank to properly judge it. Kayla sent me a photo and said, this is Queso's tank, and Mo, a mystery snail friend. It's got a fake cactus in it. It's also got some guppy grass, a cool pepper hide, a hang-on back filter. I see a thermometer hanging out back there. I'm not seeing a heater, but I'm not gonna knock you for that, because if the water is the right temperature, then you don't need a heater. But I don't see Queso. Where is Queso? Do you not have Queso yet? What is Queso? Is Queso a betta fish? And I don't see the mystery snail either. What is going on here? Where is your livestock? Is the tank still cycling? I have questions. As far as the aquascape goes, that's really cool. I'm gonna give you a 7 out of 10. Next we have Silver Tongue. You sent me photos of 4 different aquariums. Again, just like with Mercy, I'm not going to review them all. I'll just restrict it to 2. One of them being the very first one you sent. And this one's really cool. I see you've got a super, super densely planted tank with a single long fin betta fish in here. Looks like a cellophane veil tail. And I love how densely planted that is for the size of it. What is that, a 20-gallon long? I love that. I like the plants a lot. I love that gravel, that pebble kind of gravel. I've always wanted a tank with that. I can't see the entire tank, unfortunately, but from what I can see, I really like. I'm gonna give you an 8 out of 10. I am gonna skip over the 2 betta tanks that you sent me, but the last tank that you sent me looks like it's your big tank. And you said that you know it needs help, but you're unsure of what you can do. You said most of the fish that you have here will be rehomed soon and proper schools will be established. I guess that means that these, what are these, tetras are gonna be going away. And wow, that pleco is an absolute unit. No wonder you need to rehome some fish. That pleco has definitely outgrown this tank. I don't know what size this tank is. It looks like it might possibly be a 29-gallon. Again, I'm terrible at eyeballing tank sizes. Yeah, that pleco has definitely outgrown this tank, whatever size it is. Honestly, if you're looking for suggestions on what to do with this tank, I would just redo the aquascape completely and start over with something fresh. Hallie sent me a photo and a video of her betta fish tank. This is a bow front tank. It is a smaller size. It looks like it's maybe 1 or 2 gallons. In the background, I think I see a nerite snail. And I do like the moss balls. But I will say, when a tank is this small, you need to fill the tank all the way up, because every little bit of water is going to help the parameters stay stable. Let's watch your video. So that's a beautiful betta. I like that betta fish a lot. It looks like you had some floating plants in the tank at the time that you took that video. I don't know what happened to them. I guess they must have died. But your betta fish is really nice looking. I know that people say that 2.5 gallons is the minimum for a betta fish. Personally, I feel like that's kind of small. I think that 5 gallons is the minimum for a betta fish. So if you can upgrade this fish to a larger tank, I would. But for what you have, it's not bad. 6 out of 10. The next fish tank comes from Silent Ballad XXX. This is a 10-gallon tank stocked with a male betta, 3 black mollies, and 3 albino cories. The aquascape is actually really cool. It looks like you've got a mix of live plants and fake plants in there, which I can dig that. I have a mix of live plants and fake plants in this tank right here. And 10 gallons is a good size for a betta fish with a few mollies, but unfortunately it's not enough for the corydoras. I've said this several times already in the video, but once more, corydoras are a schooling fish and they need to be in groups of a bare minimum of 5 or 6. Even more is preferred, and 10 gallons does not provide a school of corydoras with enough room to properly exhibit their schooling behaviors. So they need a tank of 20 gallons or bigger in order to really thrive. Also, something worth noting is that mollies and corydoras require very different water parameters. In general, most corydoras prefer softer water, and mollies, on the other hand, are a brackish fish. They can survive in fresh water as long as the fresh water is on the harder side. So here's a quick lesson for you guys in salinity and water hardness. In layman's terms, water hardness and salinity are the same thing. What water hardness and salinity are both measuring is your TDS, or your total dissolved solids. And that is just the amount of minerals that are dissolved in the water column, such as calcium and salts, for example. So the softer water is going to have less minerals dissolved in the water, and the more and more minerals that are dissolved into the water, the harder the water gets. And eventually, water reaches a point where it's no longer considered fresh. And when you reach that point where the water is no longer considered fresh, it's considered salt water or brackish water, then that level of dissolved solids in the water is called salinity. Now, mollies, being a brackish fish, they live in an environment where fresh water and salt water meet. And this is an area where water parameters are not stable. There are spikes and dips in the total dissolved solids in brackish water. The levels of dissolved minerals in the water in these areas rises and falls very rapidly, sometimes without warning. Now, mollies and some pufferfish that come from these areas can tolerate a wide range of water parameters, and they can even be moved sometimes between fresh water and salt water very quickly. But they do have an ideal range of water salinity or water hardness that they need to live in. And on the freshwater side, mollies never really experience soft water. They live in hard water to salt water and the brackish water in between. Most corydoras, on the other hand, live in softer, more acidic water where there's not a high level of dissolved minerals in the water. And they never experience water so hard that it starts being referred to as having levels of salinity. For that reason, I don't recommend putting corydoras and mollies in the same tank because they literally require different water parameters. Yes, mollies will survive in your softer water tank for some time, but they will not live for long. Putting mollies in soft water is not something that's going to kill them immediately. It's something that's going to kill them after a few weeks. Sorry that I kind of went off on a little educational rant for a minute there, but for your first tank silent ballad, because of that mismatch in water parameter requirements and also not having the corydoras in proper numbers or in the proper size tank for what they need, I'm gonna have to dock some points. I do really like your aquascape a lot, but I'm docking points for the stock choices that you made in this tank. 5 out of 10. Silent Ballad also sent me their 5-gallon planted tank, which contains a betta that was rescued from a friend, keeping him in a 0.25 gallon tank. 0.25 gallons? Wow! Honestly, I dig this tank. I like the plants, I like the sand. That is a beautiful betta fish. I like that ornament that you have, that little cave for him to hide in. I have that same cave in my pea puffer tank. So I really do dig this. And for this tank, I'm gonna give you an 8 out of 10. Next, we have a tank sent in from Sadie. She says, this is Pi Beta Phi, the first female fraternity of all female bettas. I think the term you're looking for is sorority tank. Plants have grown much more since this photo was taken. Okay, well, let's take a look. So it looks like this is a 20-gallon long with a hang-on back filter. I definitely see there is a lot of plants in this tank, and if they've grown in to be more lush, that's wonderful, because every little bit of coverage that you can provide your female bettas in a sorority tank is going to be utilized. Female bettas can live together, but they need more than just water volume. They need lots of hiding places and lots of territory to explore. I said this to Elle about having a long fin betta in a larger tank, where if you stand on the side of the tank and look through it, if you can see out the other side, then you need more plants, and that is doubly true for a sorority tank. If you can see through the tank, you do not have enough coverage. In fact, I would recommend that you get some floating plants that have long roots that run down into the water column as well. Also, bettas are jumpers, And I see you don't have a lid on this tank. So that's something to consider. You might want to get a lid or a hood of some sort to put over the tank because your bettas will jump. As for the hang-on back filter, I can't tell from the photo what kind of filter that is. I hope that it has some sort of way of baffling the filter by turning maybe the water flow down on it or something like that, because too much water movement in a betta tank can kind of stress them out. Bettas are not very good swimmers to begin with, so if there's a really strong current, that could potentially just knock them around. If your filter doesn't have a way to turn down the current, maybe you might want to consider putting some sort of sponge over the output just to kind of baffle it and make the water flow a little less severe. You also sent a video where you introduced a female betta to the tank, and that is a beautiful all white betta fish. I don't see any other fish in the tank. I only see the one. You said Betty is her name. So I wonder how many bettas are in the tank right now. Because in a sorority tank, you need to have a bare minimum of at least 5 female bettas, and you should not be introducing them one at a time. They need to all be introduced to the tank at the same time. You also need to quarantine them to make sure they're healthy before doing so. If you introduce them one at a time, what's going to happen is the first one is going to claim the entire tank as her territory. And then when you put the second betta in, they're going to fight. And even if they work it out and they end up with their own territories, then you go and you add a third betta. And now that's disturbed the territory lines again, and they're going to fight. The best way to introduce female bettas to a sorority tank is to put them all in at the same time, especially if you only have a small number of bettas. Now, if you already have like 7 or 8 bettas in the tank and you just want to add one more, then at that point it might be okay just to add one. But when the sorority tank is just starting out, you need to add at least 5 of them to the tank all at once. There's a girl on YouTube named Aqua Girl Talks. She has several betta sorority tanks. I strongly suggest that you go and watch her videos and learn all you can about betta sororities from her. And also perhaps go get on some fish forums and talk to other fish keepers as well and get their experience. I have personally kept a sorority tank myself and it didn't work out for me. 6 out of 10. Well, that's it, guys. I think that I've made it through all of the fish tanks that you guys sent to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this here. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.